Orphans don't wear white. That's for real families. The sentence struck me like a sharp blow, ringing through the spotless bridal boutique on Madison Avenue. 12 strangers immediately turned to look. My fiancé, Derek, suddenly became very interested in the carpet design. As for me, I stood there in a $14,000 Vera Wang gown, feeling like a child again. The same child who once pressed her face against foster home windows, wondering if she would ever be chosen. But there's something people misunderstand about orphans. We learn how to endure. My name is Vivian Ashford. I'm 32 years old. And in exactly 47 hours, Derek's mother, Constance Whitmore, would discover what happens when you deliberately embarrass a woman who signs merger agreements worth more than her husband's entire law practice. But I should begin earlier. I met Derek at a charity gala 18 months ago. He was polite, engaging, and came from what he described as old money, the kind of family with summer houses in the Hamptons and ski homes in Aspen. He knew very little about my job, only that I worked somewhere in finance. I preferred it that way. Growing up with nothing teaches you quickly that people behave differently once they believe you have something. His mother, Constance, was distant from the start. At our first dinner together at their Connecticut estate, she asked about my family. When I calmly explained that I had grown up in foster care, her smile stiffened instantly. "How unfortunate," she said, then spent the rest of the evening discussing heritage, bloodlines, and the value of proper upbringing. Later, Derek apologized. "She's traditional," he said. "She'll come around." She didn't. The bridal appointment was her suggestion, a so-called bonding moment for the women in the family. Derek's sister, Tabitha, attended with her tight expression and designer purse. His Aunt Margot kept commenting on how courageous Derek was to marry someone without social connections. And Constance. Constance was fully in control, guiding the situation with careful precision. "Try this one," she said, holding up a cream-colored dress. "White is really meant for brides whose families fill both sides of the aisle. Since you don't have anyone, something less traditional might suit you better." I ignored her and chose the white Vera Wang instead. It was exceptional. Hand-stitched Italian lace, a cathedral-length train, and soft pearl detailing along the bodice. When I stepped out of the fitting room, even Tabitha looked surprised. That was when Constance spoke. "Orphans don't wear white. It's for real family." She said it loudly enough for the entire store to hear. The sales staff froze. An older woman near the veil display gasped. And Derek, the man who should have defended me, looked down and stayed silent. "Derek," I said quietly. He cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe we should." "What?" Constance laughed. "I'm just being honest. I'm trying to help her. She doesn't understand how these things work. Our family has standards. The Whitmore name carries weight in this city. We can't have wedding photos that suggest she belongs in society when everyone knows she came from nothing." I looked at Derek. He was still focused on the floor. "Okay," I said. Constance blinked. "You're right," I continued. "I don't belong in white." I smiled, the same measured smile I use in boardrooms when someone assumes I'm insignificant. "I'll change." I returned to the dressing room, carefully took off the gown, and put my clothes back on. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even. I had survived far worse than Constance Whitmore. I had survived abandonment as a newborn. I had lived through 7 foster homes by age 12. I had worked my way through college on scholarships and 3 jobs. I had built a career in a male-dominated field where I was constantly told I didn't fit. When I came out, I handed the dress to the sales associate, a young woman named Miranda, who looked close to tears. "Thank you for your time," I said. "Vivian, wait," Derek finally said. "I'll see you at home," I replied without turning back. That night, Derek returned full of apologies. His mother hadn't meant it that way. She was stressed about the wedding. She worried about appearances. He promised to speak to her. Things would improve. I listened calmly. I nodded where appropriate. And when he fell asleep, I went into my home office and opened my laptop. There was something Derek and his family didn't know about me. Something I had kept private because I wanted, just once, to be valued for who I was, rather than what I owned. I wasn't simply in finance. I was Vivian Ashford, CEO and majority shareholder of Ashford Capital Partners, one of the most influential private equity firms on Wall Street. We managed over $47 billion in assets. Fortune had once referred to me as a silent titan, silent because I avoided attention and let results speak. One of our active acquisitions had been in progress for 8 months. It involved a mid-sized law firm planning to expand internationally. The firm was called Whitmore and Associates, Derek's father's firm. The merger was valued at $180 million. It would have tripled their revenue and positioned them as a serious force in cross-border litigation. Harold Whitmore had been celebrating for weeks. He had already begun making plans based on money that wasn't technically his yet. New offices, international hires, expanded departments. From his perspective, the deal was as good as signed. From mine, it was still under review. Ashford Capital Partners had taken a controlling interest through a structured acquisition model. I had personally overseen the negotiations, though I used intermediaries and senior partners to remain in the background. The Whitmores had never asked who the final decision-maker was. They only cared that the funding was substantial and the terms generous. That night, I reviewed the latest reports. Financials were strong, but culture risk had been flagged. Leadership rigidity, poor internal diversity, and an inflated sense of entitlement among senior partners. Normally, those issues could be corrected over time. But culture always reflected leadership, and leadership reflected values. I drafted a short email to my executive team requesting a pause on the merger vote. No explanations yet. Just a delay. The next morning, Constance called. Her tone was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Vivian, dear, I've been thinking," she said. "Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. Weddings are stressful. I'm sure you understand." "I do," I replied evenly. She continued, explaining how important image was, how families like theirs had reputations to protect, how society had expectations. She never apologized. Not once. "I wanted to invite you to lunch," she added. "Just the two of us, a fresh start." I agreed. We met at a private dining room at a well-known restaurant near Central Park. Constance arrived dressed impeccably, greeting acquaintances as if the room belonged to her. Once seated, she spoke at length about guest lists, donors, and which families would be watching our wedding most closely. "You'll need guidance," she said. "I'm happy to help you adapt. Some people aren't raised with these norms, but they can learn." I listened carefully. When she finished, I placed my hands on the table. "Constance," I said, "may I ask you something?" She smiled politely. "Of course. What do you know about Ashford Capital Partners?" Her expression shifted slightly. "I'm not familiar." "That's understandable," I replied. "We keep a low profile." I explained who I was, my role, the firm, the scale, the assets under management. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize anything. I simply stated facts. She stared at me silent. I continued. "We are currently evaluating a merger with Whitmore and Associates. The final approval rests with me." The color drained from her face. "I don't mention this to intimidate you," I said. "I'm sharing it because yesterday in that boutique, you made a judgment about my worth based on where I started in life. You assumed absence of family meant absence of value." She tried to speak, but no words came out. "I grew up without parents," I said. "Not without standards." Lunch ended shortly after. She left early, citing a headache. That evening, Derek confronted me. His mother had told him everything. He was confused, overwhelmed, and embarrassed. "You could have told me," he said. "I could have," I replied. "You also could have defended me." He had no response. 2 days later, the Whitmore firm received formal notice. Ashford Capital Partners was withdrawing from the merger. The stated reason was misalignment of values and long-term vision. The fallout was immediate. Investors pulled back. Expansion plans collapsed. The firm's projected growth vanished overnight. Harold Whitmore called repeatedly. I didn't take the calls. Derek moved out the following week. There were no arguments, no dramatic endings, just a quiet recognition that respect should not have to be negotiated. As for the wedding, it never happened. I later donated the Vera Wang gown to a foundation that supports young women transitioning out of foster care. Many of them would one day wear white, surrounded by people who chose them. Because family isn't defined by lineage, and worth isn't determined by where you begin. Hired new partners and had already promised Constance a villa in Tuscany. At 6:47 the following morning, I sent a brief email to my head of acquisitions. Withdraw from the Whitmore and Associates merger. Effective immediately. No explanation needed. By 9 a.m., financial circles were already reacting. By 10 a.m., Whitmore and Associates stock had fallen 34%. By noon, Harold Whitmore was receiving calls from 3 anxious partners asking whether they should revise their resumes. I was in a strategy meeting when my assistant knocked softly on the conference room door. "Miss Ashford, Derek Whitmore is in the lobby. He says it's urgent." The 7 executives seated around the table exchanged knowing looks. They were aware of Derek's connection to me. They were also aware, because by then everyone in finance was, of what had happened to his father's firm. "Send him up," I said. Derek stepped into my corner office on the 47th floor of Ashford Tower. Yes, the building carried my name. He stopped immediately. His eyes moved from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan to the original Basquiat behind my desk, then to the nameplate on the door. "Vivian Ashford, Chief Executive Officer." "What is this?" he asked quietly. "My office," I replied. "Please, sit down." He couldn't finish. "The orphan from nowhere." I leaned back in my chair. "Yes, and the person who just withdrew a $180 million lifeline from your father's struggling firm." His face drained of color. "Vivian, please. My father. This will ruin him. Partners are already threatening to leave. The Hendersons are pulling their retainer. Everything he built." "Everything he built," I said calmly, "with a respected family name and every advantage." He flinched at my use of his mother's words. "I didn't know," he said, "about who you really are." "I'm exactly who I've always been," I replied. "The woman who grew up with nothing. The woman your mother humiliated in public. The woman you chose not to defend." I stood and walked toward the window. I wanted someone to love me without knowing my net worth. I wanted to know if I was enough on my own. I got my answer yesterday in that bridal shop. "I love you," he said. "That hasn't changed." "Your silence said more than words ever could," I answered, turning back to him. "When your mother announced that I wasn't worthy of wearing white, you looked at the floor. You allowed her to reduce me. You let me feel like that abandoned child again. And you said nothing." His eyes filled with tears. "What can I do? What do you want from me?" "Nothing." I removed the engagement ring and placed it on my desk. "The wedding is canceled. My legal team will handle the separation of our shared accounts. The terms will be fair. And your father's firm will need to find another rescuer. Perhaps your mother can locate one at her next country club luncheon." I pressed the intercom. "Security will escort you out." "Goodbye, Derek." He left without speaking. From my window, I watched him emerge onto the street far below, just another figure disappearing into the flow of Manhattan. My phone buzzed. Constance Whitmore is in the lobby. She's demanding to see whoever is in charge. I smiled. "Send her up." 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Constance stormed out, heels striking the marble floor, anger written across her face. She was so focused on finding someone to confront that she didn't notice me standing near reception until she was less than 10 feet away. "You?" she said sharply. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," I replied, gesturing to the wall behind me. "Ashford Capital Partners. Actually, I own it." The realization hit her all at once. Her face went pale. Her mouth opened, then closed. Behind her, several senior partners and employees had stopped to watch. "That's impossible," she whispered. "You're nobody. You're an orphan." "I am an orphan," I agreed. "I'm also the CEO of a $47 billion firm, a self-made billionaire, and until recently, your future daughter-in-law." I stepped closer. "You were right about one thing. I don't belong in white. White is for people who need to prove purity. I don't need to prove anything anymore." She stammered. "The merger? You have to reconsider. Harold's firm, our reputation, everything we've built. Built on lineage and a family name," I said. "How unfortunate that those things can't protect you." I straightened my jacket. "Here's what will happen next. You'll leave this building. You'll go home and explain to your husband why his firm lost its biggest opportunity. And for the rest of your life, every time you attend a gala or club dinner, you'll wonder how many people know you were undone by an orphan." Her voice shook. "Please, I'll apologize. I'll do anything." "I wanted your son to stand up for me," I replied. "I wanted basic respect when I was nobody. You couldn't give me that then, so I won't accept it now." I nodded to security. "Please escort Mrs. Whitmore out." As they guided her toward the elevator, she turned back, tears streaking her flawless makeup. "You'll regret this." Maybe, I said evenly, but I'll regret it in my penthouse overlooking Central Park, wearing whatever color I choose. The doors closed. That evening, I stood alone in my apartment, the one Derek had never seen, watching the city lights come alive. I poured a glass of wine. My phone buzzed. A message from Miranda, the bridal associate. I saw the news. You were the most beautiful bride I've ever seen in that dress. Some people's worth isn't measured by family trees. Thank you for showing me that. I replied, Thank you. That means more than you realize. 3 months later, I wore white to the Fortune 500 gala, a gown that cost twice as much as the Vera Wang. I arrived alone and left alone, and for the first time, I didn't feel like that child outside the window. I felt like myself. Vivian Ashford, the orphan from nowhere who built an empire, dismantled another, and learned that some families aren't worth joining. Some battles aren't worth avoiding. Some are worth winning. Whitmore and Associates eventually filed for restructuring. Derek relocated to Boston to work at a smaller firm. Constance quietly resigned from 3 charity boards once the story circulated. No one wanted to sit beside the woman publicly humbled by an orphan. As for me, I donated $5 million to the foster care system that raised me. I created scholarships for children aging out without families, and every Thanksgiving I host a dinner at my penthouse for former foster youth with nowhere else to go. We wear whatever colors we want, and we belong.